Good morning. Can you hear me in the back? I see a hand up. I'm assuming that means yes. Okay, great. Thank you. We want to thank you for accepting the invitation to join us this morning. We have 350 seats here by registration. We have another 235 people joining us by webinar from the comforts of their home. There is a Q&A booklet available that addresses, where are these at, Amanda? Up front when you leave. Comments, questions, Q&A comments are available when you leave. They are also posted on our website as of today. Secondly, you have a card that you can pick up. That card is an opportunity for you to address any questions that you have should you not have a chance to get your question before this group this morning. We are limited to a 2-hour time frame. We will take as many questions as we can, but if yours does not come up, please fill out the card, drop it in the box, or give it to one of us, and they will be posted with the answers. We are expecting the same type of attendance this evening, which tells us that there's a great deal of interest in the content of today's program. Let me start by introducing today's panel. On the far side, to my right, Mr. Charlie Miner, ASPPPO President. Sitting next to Charlie is CSA Board Chairman Mark Griffith, followed by Steve Birdwell, President of Sea Pines Resort, and Cliff McMacken, Director of Resort Development for Sea Pines. My name is Michael Tucker. I'm Vice Chairman of the CSA Board and Chairman of the CSA Long Range Planning Committee, and I'll be serving as today's moderator. As stated earlier, this is the first of 2 meetings scheduled for today. Because of the large number of people interested in the content, we were forced, as you know, to move from the Sea Pines Community Center to the Sea Pines Country Club, and we want to thank the club for adjusting their schedule. We are currently exploring the opportunity for a new microphone. Is that better? If I stand up, we'll make it any taller. We're currently exploring the opportunities for future meetings such as this, and once those times and those dates are made available, we will get those out to you as soon as possible. So before we get started, Charlie Miner would like to make a few introductory remarks. Charlie?
Okay. Trying to navigate that without falling off the back of the podium. As you know, all property owners in Sea Pines are subject to a complex set of rules. They're called the covenants. They've been amended several times and were augmented by rulings from the bankruptcy court. So by background, how did we get here? 2 years ago, Sea Pines Resort approached us with a request to add rooms to the inn at Harbortown. That's because the settlement agreement in Beaufort County Court, dated February 1984, limited the inn to 60 rooms. In that ruling, ASPPPO was the plaintiff and the beneficiary of the settlement. That settlement was also incorporated into the covenants. So to add rooms, 2 things have to happen. ASPPPO needs to approve amending the settlement agreement, and the residential property owners, you, need to pass a referendum approving that change. By covenant, a referendum requires 75% plus margin of those voting. When we started this, we formed a committee of residents and began discussing the conditions. I led the discussion as president of ASPPPO and was joined by Mark Griffith, chairman of CSA, Rich Spear, and Dan Westerbeck. When we met with a group of residents and community leaders, we tried to develop a comprehensive list of issues. That list started out as a jumble of ideas and opinions, but over time, it was boiled down to a fairly concise list. We also retained qualified independent counsel to advise us and research the sometimes confusing covenants in court proceedings. As we progressed, each issue was thoroughly researched, and in some cases, specialized consultants were brought in to advise. To give you an idea of the magnitude of this task, we spent roughly $150,000 in well over a year in coming to an answer on the various issues. At times, our discussions were contentious and frustrating, but in the end, we came to a tentative agreement subject to both board approval and community approval. It's not perfect, and in fact, we've made several changes after we first received public input and comment. We also made this proposal public before all the details were finalized. So not all of your questions have final answers. We are working to bring this to closure, and your comments today will help us achieve that. I believe we are at a critical turning point for this community. Soon we will submit a referendum to you for approval. A positive vote will take us in a direction to be outlined in this following presentation. In any case, our future is going to change. That should come as no surprise to anyone. We are an aging community in more ways than one, and change is inevitable. It is also much needed. Riverstone is proposing a major investment inside these gates, perhaps as much as $100 million. We believe that this investment and the proposed referendum have major benefits for all of us and will help lead us in a positive direction. But that will be for you to determine. Thank you. Mike?
While issues are complex, they become even more complicated when we have individuals spreading the latest rumor heard on a golf course or on the Isles of Harris Teeter. Personally, I'm a little tired of explaining to the 13 people I've addressed so far that the resort is not building a 9-story parking pavilion at Harbortown. I ask where you have seen a 9-story building on the island of Hilton Head to begin with. That is not going to happen. And to those people that I play golf with, let me tell you again, officially from the podium, the resort is not interested in taking away your tee times, despite what you have heard. Just recently, CSA created a website, new website that we rolled out, and part of that has an issue on there called Confirmation Station. It's a link on the website that allows property owners the opportunity to ask any questions on any rumor or any supposed thing they've heard throughout the community. Let me say to all of you that CSA's website is a sole course of accurate information, and if used, much of the divergence found in sea pines today will be minimized when people are discussing actual facts rather than rumored information. We are here this morning to help you better understand the referendum and all that it has to offer all of us. We are not asking for your support today, but we are asking for your attention. Your attention so that when you do vote, you are making decisions based on actual facts and not rumors you've heard. As a result, we have 3 primary reasons for today's meeting. Number 1 is to help everyone better understand the actual issues involved. Number 2 is to help everyone understand the actual benefits property owners and the Sea Pines community will receive with the successful passage of this referendum. And number 3 is to give all of you the opportunity to ask your questions, receive truthful answers, and then decide for yourself if you are supportive of this referendum. Although you are present here today and your fellow colleagues are on the webinar, it's important to understand that there are some property owners who are unaware of any issue revolving around the hotel agreement and this referendum. By your attendance here today, you can help us spread the word to your neighbors living here or there. We know many residents are appreciative of the resort's $85 million investments to date. These dollars have significantly added to the appearance and the appeal of Sea Pines. We also realize, however, there are some property owners opposed to this referendum, some because they dislike change, and others because they don't understand or maybe do not appreciate the benefits that will come to all of us instead of individuals. While everyone has the right to vote for or vote against this referendum, we are simply asking minds to be made up when details are brought forward and not before the facts are heard. In order, as Charlie said earlier, for this referendum to pass, there will need to be a yes vote from 75% plus one of those votes cast in order to approve the requested covenant changes. At the conclusion of this morning's session, we'll be taking as many questions as we can within the time limits provided. Only when you've heard the presentation, only when you've had the ability to receive answers to your questions, do we believe you'll have enough accurate information to decide your level of support going forward. So here's how we're going to start. Steve and Cliff are going to take you through the resort's tentative plans for the additions to the Inn in Harbortown. So let me introduce to you right now Mr. Steve Birdwell, President of Sea Pines Resort.
Good morning. Thanks, Michael. And hope everybody enjoyed the holiday weekend. And I want to thank you also for attending today's meeting and your interest in the future of Sea Pines community. This is truly an exciting time in Sea Pines. The projects, which I'll summarize here in a minute, that we've completed to date have really been improving things that needed to be improved. But the Inn expansion is really going to propel us into the future. And our proposal is very straightforward. We want to expand the Inn at Harbortown by adding 90 new guest rooms and create a truly remarkable 5-star, 5-diamond experience, which will attract affluent travelers to Sea Pines. And I think all of us want affluent travelers to come and enjoy the resort and become our next group of property owners in Sea Pines. We've offered a great package of benefits to the community, and by improving the Inn and obtaining the 5-star status, we'll be joining a very exclusive group of high-end communities like Sea Island, Georgia, Pinehurst, and Pebble Beach. So just to summarize quickly the investments that we've made to date, Michael mentioned that we've invested $85 million in the last 5 years. Those investments include 2 award-winning clubhouses, one at Harbortown and the other at the Plantation Golf Club, improvements to all 3 of the resort golf courses, and our new Sea Pines Beach Club. The projects have been completed and funded 100% by Sea Pines Resort, and they are being enjoyed daily by property owners and guests. We are committed to operating Sea Pines Resort as one of the country's leading resort and residential communities. We're very fortunate to receive many accolades and awards from some of the top resort publications, including Golf Magazine, Golf Digest, Travel and Leisure, Condé Nast Traveler, Forbes Travel Guide, AAA, and many more. And we want to continue these efforts into the future. So the Inn improvements that you're going to see the plans for in a minute are proposed in a campus setting of small, very upscale buildings that are designed to fit into the Sea Pines architectural style. The existing Inn building will remain, and we would like to renovate the interior to match the interiors of the new buildings. We plan to add a new spa and fitness facility, which will be open and available to property owners. And we'll be adding a new Inn pool and expanded food and beverage services, and creating this luxury new property designed to meet all the Forbes and AAA 5-star, 5-diamond standards. So with that, I'll let Cliff walk through the details of our plans.
Morning, everyone. I'm going to get a laser pointer here so you can see a little easier. So we can go to the next slide. I'll jump. What we're looking at here is an image of what we're planning in Harbortown. So what the concept is really based around a village. We prepared a study here that would well, just so you can get your bearings first, I'll show there's Lighthouse Road as it continues around to the lighthouse, Lighthouse Lane as it travels over to the Harbortown Clubhouse. So really the point of discussion is the inn at Harbortown site. This study has proven that the massing of our development plans are they're appropriately sized for the existing sizes of buildings in Harbortown. As you can see, there are green spaces that are located in between these development buildings. It's going to give these each element its own room to breathe. This, just to get your bearings, also is the existing inn, and then we've got 2 additional lodging buildings that would be created to gain the additional hotel rooms. The building that you see on the far right is the fitness and spa building. We've got parking that would be developed in that area. We want to encourage property owners and resort guests to use the spa and recreation and fitness facility without having to go through the hotel process. The plan here, it's more of a bird's eye view. So again, to get your bearings, as the Lighthouse Road continues around to the Lighthouse Lane, down towards the bottom of the page, you can see the existing inn. We would obtain the additional hotel rooms in 2 of these lodging buildings. And so the first building that is adjacent to the existing inn would have about 40 guest rooms, and the building that's across from the existing inn would have about 50 guest rooms. So that's how we get to the 90. In addition, the building to the right, this is the fitness and spa building. The existing inn would receive a major renovation from an architectural standpoint, plus improvements to the existing 60 guest rooms. Also, again, additional parking. Some of you have heard me make this comment before, but in our planning sessions, we always joke that every discussion regarding planning ends in a parking discussion, and that's completely true. In this particular plan, because of us expanding the development area beyond what we currently have at the end, expanding into this area, we're able to not only gain the parking spaces that we need for the additional buildings, but we're also improving that by another 100 parking spaces. So every time we get a chance to turn a shovel, basically, we're looking at how can we improve parking. Across the street behind the bakery is where we would build the new pool. The new pool would be built to meet the expectations of a 5-star resort community. There's still a lot of planning and programming needed, but that's yet to be done. Again, improvements to parking in the area. Anytime we turn a shovel, we want to make parking more convenient and more abundant. So we can go to the next one. So what's it going to look like? This is a perspective of the new entry, the new arrival experience to the inn. To the right is the porte-cochere of the existing inn. We would renovate that so that it would match with the new architectural flavor. And then straight ahead would be the 40-room guest building. And then to the left is the 50-room guest building. You can see from the images that the architectural style is very residential in nature, And we did that so that we could break down the masses of these buildings so they don't look like hotels. They feel more like residential elements and fit within that harbor town vocabulary. I'd also like to point out that by separating these buildings, we create view easements or view areas into other parts of the village. So as you're walking around, you get opportunities to sort of see into green spaces that also help minimize the overall development appearance. The massing is minor and allows views into these green spaces from various vantage points. These green spaces also create almost a patch quilt of areas to experience as you move around the village. This view is from the top of the 50 guest room building overlooking the garden and into the fitness area. So you'd see a lot of activity going on in this part of the building as it looked out over the green. Again, the concept is really is to give each one of these elements the room to breathe and create the most relaxing experience for the most affluent traveler. All right. We've included an image of a concept image of what the pool would look like, and the primary point that we're focused on right now is creating individual experiences for different groups. You can see there's chaise lounges positioned in clusters, and we're working around the existing tree canopy to keep the green sea pines feel, but to also create these individual pods of experiences for property owners and guests. And again, this pool would be built to the modern resort style. It's what's expected by a most affluent traveler, as well as what you'll see in resort communities of today. The access would be allowed for resort guests and property owners as well through a membership program is what we're planning. Then, yes. Again, these improvements we're expected to be in the range of $70 to $100 million, and an investment would be by Sea Pines Resort. The important point is that no cost to Sea Pines residents. That's really what makes up that first phase. In the next phase of development that we're planning as well, and really these are long-term plans, are improvements to the Harbor Town public areas. We believe that just in general, the retail walkways and parking and flow could use a refresh. So we're looking at ways that we can improve that total experience. Again, parking. We want to try to maximize the area that we have for parking, and so focus has been on that as well. We've taken surveys, and we'll plan to take more on what do travelers to Harbor Town want. New restaurants, new shops, different shops. So those things are being analyzed as well. And of course, the quarter deck is also a major component to that planning, and we want to breathe new life into that element. So the main objective of our resort developments are to create these resort facilities that truly deliver on Charles Fraser's original vision. Okay, one more. Okay, so research on potential impact. We engaged a leading national firm, Primar Inc., and Primar specializes in resort community real estate. And this study that was done, it focused on 3 of the 5-star resort community properties in our area: Sea Island, Reynolds Plantation, and Kiowa Island Golf Resort. And the study was it looked at 5 years prior to the 5-star hotel being installed in each one of these communities. And then it also looked at the real estate values and volume at 5 years after the 5-star hotel was installed. And the results were overwhelming. We saw as much as a 200% increase in real estate volume for every year for 5 years following the installation of the sanctuary in Kiowa, which we all understand is was an investment and made solely by the Riverstone Group. So big impact to real estate value. A lot of that volume and impact to value is generated through attracting the most affluent traveler and more of that traveler. And as they travel and visit these hotels, they get interested in real estate and so on. For our particular community, Pomar estimated a 25 to 30% average increase in annual sales volume. So the volume is made up by increase in number of transactions as well as an increase of average sale price. That translates to 40 to 50% increase in average sales price after that 5-year period. So for each year, we would see an 8 to 10% increase in the average sale price, in addition to a growth in the number of transactions. So big impact. Okay. Right, I'm going to turn it back over to Michael.
I'll make some comments first about the tennis. As you can see, tennis is being displaced with the development. And I just want to make a few comments relating to tennis, because tennis has been and will continue to be a very important activity in Sea Pines. And we're currently reviewing the options as to where to relocate the tennis facility. One of those options is to potentially use a portion of Lawton Stables. Our intention would be to continue to offer the equestrian with the trail rides and the pony rides there, and at the same time use 8 acres of the property, 8 of the 21 acres, to build a first-class new tennis facility there. We've had discussions with Stan Smith, and I'm pleased Stan could join us this morning. As you know, Stan's been associated with the resort for more than 40 years. Also, Smith Stearns Academy, and the Academy is so important to us, and we've met with Stan and his partners. And we've also met with the USTA consultants that Stan has introduced us to. And as I stated before, we're committed to tennis. We're trying to find the right answer. We have a lease there and a great tenant at Lawton, so we've got some things to work out. But that is one of the ideas and one of the options that we have available is using a portion of Lawton Stables.
Thank you, Steve. Let's take a look at the actual benefits, both for the resort as well as benefits for the community. The first one being the Sea Pines Resort would be granted the right to add 90 rooms to the hotel. I think that's fairly self-explanatory. I think the introduction that Charlie made and Steve addressed that going forward. Number 2, Sea Pines Resort will increase their own assessment by 50%, resulting in an estimated $2,300,000 in assessments paid to the CSA over the next 5 years versus the 1.1 over the past 5 years. Mark, why don't you take that as it relates to how impact that has on the CSA budget?
Well, I think it's important for those of you that have attended annual meetings or any of our board meetings, certainly in December when we approve our annual budgets. For the last 2 years, we've been operating right at the total of the collections of our assessments, and in fact have creeped into our reserves by the tune of about $500,000 to $700,000 in each of the last couple of years. So we're spending as effectively as we can possibly spend every dollar that we're collecting from the assessments, not only residential but resort and commercial, as well as the gate. This goes a considerable way in improving the dollars available on an annual basis to enhance the lifestyle that we have here in Sea Pines. To stay as we are, to only spend what we have, doesn't allow us to improve our community. Doing things like was done 4 years ago at Tower Beach. We'd like to do more of those type of things. We'd like to make improvements in the forest reserve. We'd like to make improvements to our park areas that we have behind Six Oaks Cemetery and down at Parcel 1 across from South Beach, but there are just not financial resources available to do this. This goes a long way to assisting in that.
Thank you. Next slide. Sea Pines Resort will allow residents to initiate future referendums on community issues which do not have a material impact on the resort. Charlie, you want to address that one?
Yeah, there has been a long discussion about something that a lot of people call balance of power. Is the resort and the commercial and the residential interest, are those three interests reasonably balanced? My feeling is that they are, and when you think about it this way, we are ruled by a set of covenants. The resort cannot change those covenants. They require your approval to do that. That's why we're having this meeting today. The residents can't change. They need the resort's approval to do it. So both interests are protected. Okay, there we go. So in that sense, we have a balance. However, I think there's a strong feeling that we would like the residents to be able to put forward referendums to correct a number of issues that we need to correct. And this gives us the right to do that. We don't need to seek resort approval. But it preserves the basic protection of an organization that is planning to invest a total of close to $200 million, protect that investment, and at the same time protect the covenants.
Thank you. Amanda? The Sea Pines Resort will reimburse ASPPPO for its associated expenses in the amount of $150,000. I think Charlie addressed that in his earlier comments, and we can move forward. Next one, Sea Pines Resort will deed over approximately 300 acres of the wildlife habitat zone and to the Sea Pines Forest Preserve Foundation. Charlie, you work with that group?
This has been a subject of great legal review in terms of what the obligations were. We believe that this is the best solution to it, and that is that Sea Pines Resort will deed over approximately 300 acres of wildlife habitat zone and give us a joint interest in the balance of the land so that we meet the covenant requirement, which is 65% of the forest preserve is to be owned by the Forest Preserve Foundation. So that solves that old argument. In my personal opinion, having spent a lot of time with the Forest Preserve is owned by the critters. The covenants protect the use of that land, and really it is put in there in Charles Frazier's vision to protect those critters and their habitat.
Next slide, please. Sea Pines Resort will work with ASPPPO, CSA, and other necessary parties to reach an agreement on implementing a more effective commercial assessment, which could be finalized through a future referendum. Mark?
We have worked with the resort. We recognize that all of the parties, residential, commercial, and resort, needed aid in creating some of the revenue to do the things we'd like to do here. Commercial interests are one of those. We put forward a formula that the resort supports to the commercial established group. They've taken that under advisement. The resort supports that formula. The commercial interests, are making an alternative proposal that's in the works now. The good news out of this is if we have a favorable referendum, we have the resort's support to bring to the community a new formula for assessing the commercial interests, their annual assessments. This is not hugely material, but in the fairness, the aspect of this that Charlie's talked about, getting everybody's participation is helpful. So I think that probably next spring, when there'll be a subsequent referendum, it'll include modifications to the commercial assessments.
Thank you. Amanda? Sea Pines Resort will donate $1 million in funding improvements for Sea Pines, subject to ASPPPO approval. As chairman of the Long Range Strategic Planning Committee, this $1 million, based on approval rights of ASPPPO, can be used in any way to improve the amenities that property owners are seeking as we look to change this organization called Sea Pines. Next. Sea Pines Resort will promote voluntary donations from guests to the Sea Pines Forest Preserve Foundation and agrees to share revenue from the gator boat concessions on a 50-50 basis with the foundation. Charlie, you want to address that?
Yeah, the Forest Preserve really has very minimal revenue at this point in time to maintain itself. You've probably passed it through the boardwalk, seen the docks, and things like that. We had started on a major improvement program to change the gate so that it would access off Greenwood Drive across from Lawton Stables. That was wiped out by the hurricane. But in the long run, for the Forest Preserve Foundation, an independent foundation, to survive, it needs a revenue source. This will provide potentially a very significant revenue source and allow us to continue to do the improvements that we would like to do within the reserve.
Next slide, please. Sea Pines Resort would support an increase in the gate fee. Implementation would require commercial approval. I'm going to flip this over to both Mark and Charlie because this has been a very, very avid discussion throughout the community. It deals with representation on the gate entry committee, and it also deals with funding issues. Mark, why don't you take the first funding issue?
Well, let me first say that the gate committee, which is a standing committee of CSA, puts forward and makes recommendations to the board for gate policy. The CSA board is the ultimate party which adopts policy for the operations of the gate. In addition, so regardless of what the gate committee does and what the gate committee makeup is or what the CSA board does, there's another agreement that exists that came out of a bankruptcy that grants the approval authority of any fee related to access to this community, grants approval, the right to assign approval from the resort or from the commercial interests. So this is not a covenant term. This is about getting the resort's cooperation, one of the two parties that are necessary, getting their agreement to support an increase in the gate fee. That's just one party. There's still another party, which is Sea Pine Center, that also has to provide written approval. But to have the resort supporting what currently is proposed is a $10 gate fee that would be in place during the season, April through September, would generate substantial revenue for CSA. I think upwards of $800 to $1 million if daily passes continue to be sold at the same pace. So having the resort on board is a positive. We still have some work to do with the commercial interest.
Yeah, I would comment that Charles Fraser designed this community, Sea Pines, uniquely on Hilton Head. We are the only community that is comprised of the three entities, the residents, the commercial interests, and the resort. And those covenants and those rulings that have come out of the bankruptcy court protected each of those interests. We all agree here at this table that the gate fee should be increased, and we believe $10 is a reasonable start on that. But the bankruptcy court granted protection to the people, the commercial interests, so that we couldn't raise it unreasonably and destroy their businesses. And as residents here, like ourselves, they have rights which have to be respected. This movement here will put significant pressure on the commercial interests to move along with it. And we've made, I think, a lot of progress in terms of talking to them about how we're going to get forward on this. Recently, three of us met with the owners of Sea Pine Center, Frank Fowler and Ned Payne, and had a productive discussion. That's a tough discussion, though. And again, I think we're making some progress on that, and we intend to push that issue hard.
One other thing to add to that is because of the community asking for better representation from the property owners on that gate entry committee, At the last gate entry committee meeting, a motion was made and approved, and Charlie Miner, as president of the ASPO, is now co-chairing the gate entry committee for the property owners. Next slide, please. Sea Pines Resort will offer Heritage Farm a 10-year lease extension to assure its continued operation at its existing location. For those of farmers out there that use that source, you now are secure to know that that facility will be available to you for the next 10 years. Next slide. The ASPO board agrees to support a referendum approving a portion of the existing Lawton Stables track be used as a public tennis facility. I think Steve addressed that. If there's anyone else on the panel who would like to make any comment to that, fine. If not, we will move forward.
Just a quick comment in that when we realized that that 8 acres was necessary, potentially necessary for tennis, we wanted to assure the farmers across the street that they weren't going to be impacted, and that's the reason for the 10-year extension, is just to make sure that there's an agreement in place, and there was no intent on the part of the resort to do this in the first place, but the agreement kind of solidifies that.
And Cliff, you can probably, or Steve, you can probably confirm this, but my understanding is the 8 acres that are subject to this is that as you approach the stable's entrance, there are several pastures to the left. This is not the area, the stables where you see the horses or the stables itself. Those would all remain, as I understand it, correct?
That's correct.
So it's the area to the left of the entrance.
Next slide, please. What does this mean to all of us as property owners and residents of Sea Pines? The Sea Pines Resort and property owner desires are the same, and that is to keep Sea Pines a preeminent coastal destination. Sea Pines Resort has invested more than $85 million in this plantation, most in the past 5 years, and they want to invest even more. I can assure you, in my 3.5 years on the board, as with Charlie and Mark, and working with Steve and the resort people, there are other owners of resorts that we would not want to have owning Sea Pines Plantation. These enhancements and investments benefit all Sea Pines community property owners, yet cost owners nothing. So unless there are additional comments from the panel, Steve, I know you wanted to make one. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to address a couple of important topics, traffic and also the right of first refusal. First, traffic and congestion in Sea Pines. Sea Pines, as we know, is a busy place. We've essentially got a small town with roughly 5,000 households, and of course the resort operating as well. And there's many services that are required. There's only 2 ways to get in and out of our gates, and that creates bottlenecks at times, especially at the entrance gate and the main gate at Greenwood. We can't, it's been stated, we really can't create this 5-star experience and have traffic tie-ups throughout the resort, and especially at the gates. And we want to do our part to help with the traffic flow. As I mentioned, we've agreed to increase the gate fee. We're offering $1 million, which could be used for any number of things, including improvements to the gates and the lanes there at Greenwood. And we've also offered an easement over a portion of the property at the Welcome Center if it's needed to help expand the road there. So we want to do everything we can do. We intend to continue to work with CSA and the town of Hilton Head Island and working on improved traffic flow in the future. We're serving on CSA's new gate improvement committee, which is beginning to work on workable solutions for the gate. And we've also engaged a traffic engineer to gauge and determine the traffic impact on the 90 rooms, on the existing 60 rooms that we have and the new 90 rooms that we want to add. We know the amount is going to be small in comparison to the amount of traffic, but we will have those numbers, and we'll show the impact to the traffic. So we're trying to do everything we can possibly do to work with CSA to improve the traffic flow. Right of first refusal. The right of first refusal is an important right that's existed since the beginning of the covenants in 1974. We've used it very infrequently. I can only think of a handful of times in recent years that it's been used. When it has been used, the property owner has received the same amount for his property sale that they would have received under the original agreement with the purchaser. We're studying a program to use a independent appraisal as a basis for determining what fair market value is on properties that we may have an interest in. We've been talking, as you know, Fairway 1 is a property that we've bought 3 properties in. We've been talking to the owners over there at Fairway 1. We'd like to be able to use this independent appraisal method as a benchmark for what the fair market value is of the properties. But sellers of property will be receiving a premium when they sell their property. Sellers retain the commissions that are normally paid to real estate agents. They avoid the hassles of having to show property to prospective buyers, and they also avoid the potential reduction in the sales price, with the normal inspection, third-party inspection process. So we want the sellers of the properties to walk away with more money than they would have otherwise, and our whole goal, anytime we've used the right of first refusal, is to have fair dealings with property owners and making sure that everybody wins in the situation. So I know there's a lot of discussion about it. It has been used a very few times in recent years. So I just wanted to address that. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Let me just make one comment with regards to the traffic that Steve alluded to, the gate entry configuration. At the last board meeting, it was announced we have already had one meeting with the town engineer, with a traffic engineer, civil engineer, looking at all the options that have been presented to CSA over many, many years at fixing the traffic flow at the Greenwood Gate. Once they have finalized those assessments, which we've asked them to do, we will take to the town hall meeting a format very similar to this, all of the options that CSA has had in the opportunity to look at over many, many years. We will then ask our property owners for suggestions with regards to how do you think we fix that gate. We're very much aware that there's a problem there, but every time we've asked for solutions, most of the time, I don't know, but fix it. So my point is that before we do anything at that gate, we will be bringing it to the community so you know the options, know what the problems have been, and we'll be able to garner your input as to how you think we should address that problem going forward. Okay, where we are today right now is let's get you some opportunity to ask some questions. What we will do is when we go forward, we will start with microphone number 1, microphone number 2, and then there will be a webinar question that Amanda will pass on going forward. Once we've gone through 1, 2, and webinar, we will kick back to number 1, number 2, and webinar. We will go in that formation. Because it's important that we are able to hear you, we will not be taking people raising their hand and saying, I'd like to speak. What I'm going to suggest to you do now is if you have questions, I'd like for you to start forming at line 1 and microphone 2 going forward. I will start with microphone 1. Please come forward so we don't have to waste valuable time. We are going to address the questions that we have before us live, and those that come in on the comment card, we will post the answers to that. We will not be able to get to everyone, I'm quite sure, because we do have a 2-hour time limit on this, but we will take as many questions as can be fed into our time allocation. So,
Michael,
yes.
before we questions, do you want to address this slide rather quickly?
Yes, that'd be a great idea.
Perfect.
Timing would be important. Referendum requirement and timeline. Discussions have been ongoing for approximately 2 years. To begin the next phase, the referendum needs to be put forward to increase the size of the inn by 90 rooms. Open meetings today and several throughout the summer to go. And intent for referendum timing is early fall with a 30-day voting period. First question, Don?
Thank you, Michael. I'm Don Carlson. I'm past board member of CSA and ASPPPO, and I think the plans are truly exciting. I hope it can be worked out and that the community all benefits. The plans are great. The sharing of material, I think, is very helpful. But the terms that have been presented at this point, from many people's standpoint, are not acceptable in terms of addressing community issues. Mike, you started out by asking and talking about getting the facts on the table, and I think this forum is great to do that. One item just to start, everyone needs to understand that ASPPPO owns the hotel agreement and they are the moving party. CSA has been at the table, but it is not their issue, and just by nature, there is a conflict there, and I call that out. With respect to the referendum, going back to 1984 to the lawsuit, there were two documents that came out of that settlement agreement, or the settlement. One was a settlement agreement. One was a memorandum of understanding between ASPPPO and, at that time, the Sea Pines Company. I hope you've all read those because they are incredibly insightful and they provide a lot of facts as to why we're here and what we're talking about today. It's ironic that in this agreement, the very first item, and this is the memorandum between ASPPPO and the company. ASPPPO at that point, I am assuming the board was well-intentioned, naive, but frankly, they were snookered. The first issue addressed in those documents related to gate control. It appointed an advisory board for the gate access, well-intentioned to try to reduce traffic, control the fees, but it had no teeth in it. And as it ended up, it withered, nothing was done, and that first issue at that time really resulted in the excessive traffic that we have today. And my suggestion is let's get it right this time and get gate control appropriately with ASPPPO that protects the property owner's interests. As I read the memorandum, I couldn't believe it because you can't make this stuff up. The second item on the agreement dealt with the right of first refusal. It made a cosmetic change, didn't make a material change, and we're talking about it again today. The third item provided that ASPPPO have the ability to appoint 4 members to the ARB. And in addition to that, the company provided that they would send any changes to the ARB. Currently, ASPPPO appoints 2, and for some reason has deferred 2 positions to CSA. ASPPPO has the ability right now to work well with the resort to control and be respectful of anything that goes into Harbor Town. That's in place if we choose to use it, but let's do it right this time. The fourth provision, lifted right out of the agreement, and I'll quote, is to achieve an equitable contribution from all parties benefiting from the facilities in Sea Pines, including proprietors of all commercial activities. Now we know this has been totally abused. Commercial interests are paying about $200,000 out of a, $7 million budget? I don't know what the current budget is, 8? Do the math, it's incidental. We need to fix this, let's do it right. We've got a wonderful opportunity here to work with the resort to upgrade the community, but the amenities that the issues that we have need to be addressed. We were snookered once. Let's not let it happen again. Address the issues, get them into the referendum, fix the problems, And then as a community, let's move forward. I think it benefits everybody, but not with the term sheets the way that they are. Thank you.
Let's try to limit, we appreciate the input, let's try to limit to the questions at hand. Sue?
My name is Susan Emke. I'm a resident, have been a full-time for 15 years. And again, I want to thank all 4 or 5 of you for what you've done. But I think the term sheet is inequitable. It is inequitable to the residents. You have spoken of benefits to the residents. All of these actually benefit the resort more than the residents. Anything that does benefit us is qualified, and we pay, residents pay almost $7 million out of a $10 million budget. It's not the money here. It is, we appreciate the 50% increase, although it is arguable that the resort should be paying 100% more. They were allowed to pay 1/2 in money, and they were supposed to pay 1/2 in kind. When CSA took over their in kind, they have never paid that extra 0.5%. I also question, maybe it'll come out in the terms, but supporting a $10 increase and saying that commercial has a veto power. They do not. They have a veto power over any increase that affects the Sea Pine Center. You can work around that. Also must materially damage the Sea Pine Center, and we know the Sea Pine Center is financially having problems. That also brings me to the question of, or the issue of materially damage the resort. That figure, there has to be a figure there, because otherwise, as Don says, you're back 30 years ago and you have no teeth in the terms. And as I say, it says that Michael Tucker has said, it costs the owners nothing. It costs us another 34 years or whatever of not getting a good term. It is inequitable. My husband likens this deal to Manhattan. The Dutch are getting Manhattan. We are getting some glass beads. I think you can do better, and I hope you do better if you want our support. And it is a beautiful plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll take our next
Amanda?
question from the webinar. A question from the webinar from a property owner, Bob. Is there an ability for the resort to build a water park and materially change the Harbortown area? Example, eliminating the Harbortown Bakery. I'll repeat the question. Is there an ability for the Sea Pines Resort to build a water park or materially change the Harbortown area? For example, eliminating the Harbortown Bakery.
Well, I guess first of all, I want to make sure. Hello? Here we go. Okay. Well, first of all, I just want to be clear that we have no intentions of building a water park, contrary to some rumor. Our intentions are to build a resort-style pool, and it would have more features than the current pool, but features that are common for these resort communities. We currently have those rights, have the right to build this pool facility today, prior to the referendum. We also have general rights to make adjustments to Harbortown as well. We've discussed our intentions, there's really nothing more. But yes, to answer the question, we do have those rights.
Bakery.
Bakery.
Yeah. We could also relocate the bakery, which are our intentions. We don't want to take that away.
Question from microphone number 1.
Yeah, thank you for the CSA and the ASPPPO. I've been a non-resident owner for 40 years, and I think we all benefit from the multidimensional aspect of Sea Pines. That it's not only a primary residence, a secondary residence, but also a resort with all the amenities available to it. And appreciate what Riverstone Group has done over the last several years, and look forward to more. But my main point is, any kind of textbook negotiating, guidelines would suggest don't leave hanging chads. Get it resolved with where the tennis facility is going to go. Get it resolved. What's going to happen with the commercial? Because you lose all sorts of leverage if you don't get everything resolved simultaneously. And also just throw out one other thing. Somebody mentioned that the Sea Pine Center is struggling. It's been struggling the entire 40 years I've been here. Maybe that should be considered as a possible relocation of the tennis facility. Just a random, I don't know what it would cost to acquire it, but anyway. But my suggestion, very strong suggestion, is don't leave these unresolved issues because they'll never get resolved.
Thank you, sir.
Just a comment back on that. I wish we could resolve all of these right now. Once again, what I said was we released this information before all the details have been finalized. We felt it was more important to get it out in front of the public, even though we couldn't. And tennis is really the big unresolved piece of this. So,
microphone number 2.
Joanne Taylor. Thank you very much. And at the last coffee I attended, it was kind of put out there that the parking in Harbortown was going to be vertical, not linear. Could you explain the change? And if that's, I mean, I heard you say we're not building a 6-story parking garage, but it didn't eliminate a 4-story parking garage.
We currently don't have any plans to add a parking garage in Harbortown. We want to improve the parking that's there, try to expand on the parking and maximize the surface parking that we would have. So we don't have any current plan to add a parking garage. It may be necessary in the future, and if it is, we would blend it into the rest of the buildings down there and would screen it with new shops, but it's not in the current plan. We want to encourage property owners to come back and to use Harbortown, but I think many people stay away because of the thought that you're not going to be able to find a parking space in Harbortown. And we want to try to fix that if we can. And right now what we're planning to do is try to just improve and expand the surface parking that we have and try to just maximize the number of spaces that we can offer.
So you can do that with the 90 extra rooms?
The 90 rooms will not be a problem because the buildings are all going to have parking underneath them. So the parking at the hotel site is not going to be a problem.
It's going to be underground.
Underground parking, just like the current inn has. But we want to expand the parking over in the Harbortown Yacht Basin area so that you could enjoy the shops and the restaurants there in Harbortown. In those parking lots, we plan to realign, improve, and try to expand the number of spaces that are offered.
Thank you.
Amanda?
Our next question from the webinar: how many tennis courts will remain in the Harbortown area for use by owners?
In the plan that we've shown today, there's 4 to possibly 6 courts that will be available. They'll be managed through the new fitness center there and coordinated with our other tennis. The tennis center that could be built at Lawton Stables could have somewhere between 16 and 18 courts, and that should give us plenty of courts with the 4 to 6 that should remain in Harbortown.
Thank you, Steve.
Microphone 1.
I have a student in the tennis academy, and we have uprooted for him to do this. And, sorry, I've got to know that he can finish out, that you're not going to start this in, and there will not be tennis courts for that academy for those kids. It's not fair to Stan, and it's not fair to those academy kids. There's not a plan in place for those tennis courts as the inn is being built. If there's any gap time that the inn is being built and there's not room for that academy, there's got to be a plan and a timeline for them, please.
We certainly understand the importance, and we've been working with Stan, and we want to have a great solution there for tennis.
No one at number 2. I'll assume. Amanda?
The next question from the webinar. How long do you anticipate the construction of the new facilities to take? What are the plans being contemplated to limit the disruption to the Harbortown area if this is approved?
Well, once we would have approval to move forward with the plan, we've got about 12 months of design work that would be needed. So if we started that work this early fall, it would take us around to the fall of 18 before we would break ground as early as possible. We're going to be developing the construction schedule during that period, but right now we estimate that it would be about an 18-month period. And that work would be managed in a way to reduce the overall impact. Obviously, we've all got interest in that. I think we did a good job during the Harbortown Clubhouse redevelopment to minimize the impact as much as could have been possible with the feat that we had ahead of us. And so we would utilize those same methods to do that and be willing to hear any advice on that as well.
Thank you. Alex?
Alex Cruden. Since the terms of the agreement were first sort of made public, they have changed somewhat as discussion has gone on. Can we assume that more changes are possible before the final terms are put up in the referendum?
That's one of the reasons for the meeting today, is to listen to what what the community feels. There are 2 approaches to an agreement. One is to dream what you would like to have and put down stuff that is impossible to do. And the other one is try and find a reasonable pathway that can actually be accomplished. So some of the things that have been requested are doable, and we're trying to make progress on those things. Some of them are very difficult to deal with, and I don't see a practical solution. Don mentioned the issue of the gate committee or the gate control. There is a court order that stipulates that issue. It is a court order. It's not part. It wasn't part of the covenant, so you can't change a court order if it's not in the covenants. So that's something we've got to work around, and I think we're going to make progress on that. But it's not quite as simple as just changing everything to a new list of demands.
Thank you.
Microphone number 2, Carl.
Thank you. Michael, you made some statements about innuendo and false statements and whatever else with respect to the information around this. And I think that comment is certainly open to question. I would like to comment on a couple of the issues which came up this morning. First of all, let me say I'm a 42-year property owner and a 22-year permanent resident, and I've been a member of this club since 1976. Now, you mentioned that there was a so-called citizens committee to meet with Mark and with Charlie. And I don't know exactly where Dan Westerbeck was in that. I don't know which foot he was in the committee and which foot he was a guest. But who was invited? Well, it was Don Carlson, and you've heard from Don, and many people consider Don to be a student, a true student of the covenants. I do not. Don is a scholar of the covenants. He knows what's in there. He did omit one very important thing, which I'm going to bring up. Who else was on that committee? Sue Emke. You've heard from her. Anyone else? Yeah. A fellow named Tom Hagort. Tom, in my mind, is a brilliant lawyer. He was honored by being elected to Harvard Law Review in common with all 5 Harvard graduate judges when Scalia was on the court. And now it's 4 out of 5 who are Harvard Law Review. That is a distinct honor if you understand that. And I was there too. And it was very evident to several of us when we began the discussion, being charged with the issue of what are your ideas about a referendum, that the people who were asking us had no idea of the issues involved. No idea. And they asked us to present a list of recommendations. Now, Tom and I had been talking for years with, at different times, some of the other people who were invited, and we had been accumulating a handwritten list of the issues that needed to be resolved, that were outstanding about the equipoise or balance between the commercial interests, and in particular the resort, and the property owners. And we were asked to give them this information. And Tom and I did the easy way. We took the list, he typed it up, we presented it with the expectation at the next meeting, with the expectation that there were going to be more meetings at which we would discuss these issues. It's not that we didn't present a prioritized list. This list was subject to discussion. We were never invited back again, and it shows. Now, with respect to some of the comments, we saw these data about the increase in value of real estate. Let's take Kiowa, for example. How much was it, 20 to 30%?
That was a 200% increase.
200% increase. Now, when you look at data, you have to understand what's the numerator and what's the denominator. Were these data versus the days of our near depression in 2008 and 9? As a matter of fact, a couple of months ago, Barron's, the preeminent weekly financial periodical, had a supplement. I believe it was called Portfolio. And this had to do with, I think, 20 plus or minus a couple fine, outstanding resort places to live, of which Kiowa was one. And they gave the change in real estate values over the prior year or two. And I don't remember whether it was for 2015 or 16, but for Kiowa, the values went down, as it did for many other of these resorts. If I remember correctly, Pebble Beach went up and maybe 1 or 2 others, but in most of them, they went down. So where the 200-300% comes from, I think, is open to question. Now, I think that Don omitted something in his discussion about the additional hotel rooms. If you go back to the hotel agreement, it was an agreement between ASPO and the resort to reallocate the distribution, not the number, the distribution of about 200 hotel rooms that the resort had the right to build. And with the approval of putting 60 hotel rooms into the inn, plus some changes in the Harbortown Yacht Club, there were additional, I think, 100 rooms which were allocated geographically to the Plantation Club. Everything I read between the lines tells me that what this agreement is about is not those 100 rooms and asking to relocate them to Harbortown, but for an additional 90 rooms. Additional, still leaving 100 rooms to be built at the Plantation Club. Now, you know, when I was a 4th-year student, a very elderly psychiatrist with his Viennese accent said to me, he said, "Mr. Engelman, you've got to listen very carefully to what the patient tells you, but you must listen even more carefully to what the patient doesn't tell you." I thought he was right then. I'm certain he's right today. There are things which are presented here which were half-truths in disguise, and they really need to be unearthed. Now, this business, the ability to initiate a referendum, cut me a break. Come on, right now, the residents have the right, although it's very difficult, to initiate a referendum. They do not have the right to approve it unless the resort approves it. They have an absolute veto. What's the good of having a referendum with 100% voting in one direction and someone else having a bullet veto? Come on now, let's get serious. These are supposed to be knowledgeable barons of industry that are making these negotiations. I don't know. I hope they were dealing in jelly beans and not in dollars when they were doing those things.
Give you just a couple more minutes, Carla.
Well, I won't even take that much. The whole wildlife zone is irrelevant. Doesn't make any difference who owns it. It will be exactly the same. There was something mentioned here, though, that I think is what, again, you would call a Freudian slip. And I don't know whether it was Steve who made this or who did from the dais, that you wouldn't like to have an owner whom you wouldn't like taking over these things. Well, you know what, folks? The covenants permit the successor, the buyer, the successor of the Sea Pines Resort, have exactly the same rights of veto and everything else as they do. And if someone comes up as the next owner, and there will be one, and that owner is inimical to the residents, just guess what's going to come out of that.
All right. Can I make a comment, please, at this point?
May I finish?
No. You've had plenty of time, Carl, quite honestly.
Not as much as you have, Michael.
Well,
He's the moderator.
I would only want to say that if you were addressing, as you said at the very beginning, the importance of listening, I know you'll be upset with this comment, but you started your remarks by saying, I talked about a committee. I did not. It was Charlie that spoke to it, not me. So let's get facts. Okay? Anything from the webinar?
We do indeed, yes. So we have several questions. I'm going to try to consolidate them. They surround the with the new Harbortown pool being proposed in this discussion. People are wanting to know what is going to be the cost to property owners for a membership to that swimming pool facility.
Well, we're currently in the process of determining the cost of the pool, which would also, I'm sorry.
Let him speak.
Yeah, which would also would help us determine the value of the membership. As we get closer to or further along, I think we would like to get a good understanding of those interested in memberships, and we would find the right balance so that the worst thing that we could do is have a pool that's overrun and no fun for anyone. So we want to try to manage that appropriately, and we need memberships that people can afford and that people will buy. It doesn't do us any good to have them overpriced. So I think there's still a lot of work to be done to understanding what that actual membership cost will be, but we hope to have a good amount of participation from property owners.
Thank you. And one more follow-up question. Will you limit the amount of memberships to residential property owners?
Well, as I said, we will need to find the right balance. I mean, we're not setting a limit today, and that'll be determined as we move forward in understanding the programming of the space and the usage. Currently, our pool has very little property owner usage. So I think one thing we would need to understand is what would the usage of the new pool be? Would it be different?
I think it's also important to note that residents' rights to not only the Harbortown pool, but also the pool at South Beach has been historically paid for by CSA for you. And it's not a right that any of you or CSA is entitled to. Bob Gossett down at South Beach and the resort has over time allowed us to purchase a right for you to access that pool. So if that we had been told some time ago was going to go away, and it has gone away, just like the plantation pool went away years ago. So it's not a right that we've had for many, many years that is now being taken away from us. It's been purchased for you by CSA.
I'd like to go back to and just make a quick comment on Carl's comments and agree with him. When we started that first meeting, we didn't have the slightest idea what was involved in the covenants. He's probably right. After 2 years and $150,000 of consultants, we're a lot smarter now than we were then. And I've got to say that we had excellent counsel, excellent advice, and the decisions we made in terms of how we dealt with that were based on what we believe, and we're homeowners too, was in the best interest of the homeowners here. We're not some alien force. We're just like you are. We live here. Our kids come to visit us here. Our dogs walk down the streets with you. We're the same as you are.
Microphone number 1.
Yes, hi. My name is George Paletta, and I had a couple of questions, and one of them is around the Sea Pine Center, who has this vote on the gate. But prior to me getting to Sea Pine Center, I want to say that I felt that that the resort was very, very poor in a representation for itself and for Sea Pines at the C to C, okay, the circle to circle, and with the town in trying to reduce traffic coming in here. I think that I was at a lot of those meetings and I never heard anything positive. Now we have an increased 4-story building at Coral Sands, a new hotel going up behind the New York Pizza. We have a new Hilton that just opened down on South Beach Drive. It has a tremendous height to it, about 7 stories, and it's continuing to build up here. And I really felt that you guys should have stood up and really put some emphasis on reduction of traffic into this area. C to C, in my estimation, did nothing for Sea Pines. And I don't believe that our representative did anything for us as well. So I'm very, very unhappy with the results of that situation. To get back to this, is Sea Pine Center, what do they pay? You've told us you pay 200 and something. What does Sea Pine Center pay that they have such a, quote, voice into this situation? Do we have an answer to that?
Well, it's not about payment. It's about an agreement that was granted by the bankruptcy trustee and approved by the bankruptcy court, giving them written approval over the fees charged for daily access to the community. So it's not about dollars. That's an agreement.
I wanted to know what the
so
dollars.
we could make it $10 or $25. No. We still have to get their blessing.
No. I'm asking what they pay. What do they pay?
Their assessment is?
Yes, please.
I don't know offhand.
Okay. Well, if the resort is paying $230,000.
That's considerably less.
I would imagine so. I would imagine so. Also, there's going to be an increase, as you gentlemen and I want to show my appreciation for the hard work, but you did come up and say at the last CSA meeting, which I was at, that looking forward, we are going to increase our assessments here at CSA to look at the future for the resort here, for the property owners. That's going to come up, and I wouldn't doubt that it'll double. And not making any comment about whether it should triple, double, or whatever. But we all know we're going to be in a budget crisis. So, with the resort paying that minimum amount, and then it's going to go to $2 million in 5 years, when I believe at the CSA meeting we were going to be about tapped out due to the sewer projects, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think that that's going to help us raise anything. So I think we need to get them up on board. As far as the Sea Pines Forest, 300 acres, it becomes our responsibility, not theirs. Hopefully it's not an additional cost to us. The other thing is they want to improve the gate entry and the traffic impact. And, you know, Steve, I'd like to thank you, because that's the first time I heard you offer something, if it's necessary, for a right-of-way along Greenwood Drive to help the gate if there's a redesign. Because I remember it was very adamant about the resort not giving up any right-of-ways or anything else. At one time, we even talked about going through Publix on the side there, et cetera. And I know the resort was against that, and probably rightfully so, but at least you're coming to the table with that. So I'm hopeful that there's a lot more negotiations to be done, and I don't think that we should get sold out so quick. And I'm also very concerned futuristically for parking in the Harbortown area, and I don't know if we have any kind of a ability to have input if there's going to be a parking garage, which I think at one time we will see. Thank you.
Microphone number 2.
Thank you. I'm a relatively newcomer. I've only been coming here for about 20 years and a property owner for about 15. I'm a non-resident owner. And there's a lot of people who are a lot wiser than I on these underlying issues. My question is, how many things are out there that we don't know of? Coming here this last week, I've noticed we've now moved all the ropes in front of the beach club up to what I call the high tide mark. And for a lot longer ways, both the ways down the beach. So I've been here many, many times when that high tide comes in and everybody got to scoot back. Now there ain't anywhere to scoot. And I've been there when it's been very crowded at high tide. So is this a permanent thing? Is this a right the resort has? And how many of these other expansion issues where there's the potential to do whatever it is we're doing there that we as residents that don't know that have taken them for granted, do we have to be concerned? It's kind of a question I have and I'd like you to answer. And I would like to commend you. The things that you've done over the last 5 years are huge. I think great improvements. I applaud you for those. I applaud you for wanting to renew the face of sea pines. I think we need that. But at the same time, those of us who own properties here and live here and know that, like Mr. Paletta said, we know we're going to get increased assessments. We don't know how much, and we don't know what we're going to get for them. But please, I do want to know about the ropes being moved up and what resident owners can do about enjoying the beach at high tide time.
Well, let me make a comment. Charlie and I both served, we're in our 4th year on these respective associations, CSA and ASPPPO, as well as Michael. I would like to think, sir, that we have overturned all the rocks. We got a 60 plus, close to 60-year-old community here, some very complicated covenants. We think after the 4 years or 3.5 years that we've been around, that we've turned over all the rocks. But things like the roping to the high water mark was a surprise to us. And last year, ASPPPO, and I suppose it might have been a surprise to the resort, they had ownership there. But when they figured out they had ownership there, they decided they wanted to control it. And we took a very, very hard look at that. We dealt with the town. We looked at liquor licensing. The conclusion was they own it. They have the right to do exactly what they're doing. Is there something else out there within these 5,000 acres that we don't know about? I don't think so, but I can't tell you absolutely that we have a handle on every single possible thing that might creep up. Good news is you've got an owner that's been here for over 10 years. You now have some administration and some board directors that have taken the time and the interest of digging into these things and are trying to do our best to manage them.
So are they going to keep the ropes at the high tide, or?
Well,
no one's saying anything about that. I mean, we as people who live here expect to be able to use our beach even at high tide. So.
You have a question, Steve.
Well, the area that we own there at the beach, we own a very small portion of the beach. And what we want to do and are doing there is trying to offer, as we know, the beach club is a very popular place to go to the beach.
Very nice, and thank you for doing that.
And we just want to keep this one little section that we own as a more controlled area. It's open and available to property owners. And the chair service is available. We have food and beverage service there. Towels are offered to those to those chairs. We have an attendant down there with bottled water that's complimentary. And it's just this one little section of the beach that we want to try to spread the chairs out a little bit and just offer a little premium experience for those that want to experience the beach in that way. The rest of the beach, to the right and left, and of course to the front, are open and available to anyone. And it's just this one little section that we own.
Please don't take this in the wrong way, but have you ever drug down your beach paraphernalia and have to, it's not as small as you'd, it's a long way. It used to be small. Now it's a long way, either right or left when you come on the beach. And if you're dragging 4 or 5 grandchildren and a cart full of chairs and high tides coming, where you go? I'm just asking you to please reassess it, maybe checkerboard it, maybe do something. But right now, as a resident, I feel like I'm getting blocked out of the area I've gone and hung out for the last 20, 25 years.
Thank you. Webinar question, Amanda?
We have a question from the webinar related to CQ's restaurant. What will happen to the building housing CQ's restaurant?
Well, as we work through the development plans, we'll get into those details, but there could be some reconfiguration of some of those existing buildings to maximize that area. So.
Let me remind you that we are on a time frame. I would like for you to limit your discussions primary to questions so that the people behind you and others wanting to get questions can be answered going forward. Thank you. Number 1, microphone, you're on.
Thank you. I would be remiss if I didn't first thank all the board members who serve on both CSA and ASPPPO for serving. They have a very important job. My issue is, and I only have 2 this morning. I know the time is limited, but let me get those out first so you know where I'm coming from. But I have some supporting issue or questions or information for you to be considering. My first issue does relate to the right of first refusal. I loved what I saw on the screens this morning about what is planned and all the work that's going on to bring this thing together. But my family will vote no on the referendum if we don't get this issue of first right of refusal taken care of. It's a very important issue. It's a lot more complex than a lot of people give it any credit. They say, why is it important? It's important to every resident in this hall tonight or today, and anyone that's not here, if they have children or grandchildren who are heirs in your will. There are lots of complex issues relating to property being changed down the road based on value being paid or charged by other sales. I've got to now rewrite my will because it doesn't add up. They're going to be in a bind. I'm not going to be around to supervise them, and I want to have peace in my family when I'm gone. But that's not going to happen the way it's set up today. It's been said here this morning that, at least I think Mr. Miner said he thinks there is balance between the 2 boards on the interest and concerns of residents. I disagree with that statement because there's too many duplication of board members on both boards. And we also have at the front desk is the resort. I've got everybody that I need to talk to right here. I thank you for listening to what is happening. You promised that there's going to be premium payments paid for people who sell to the resort based on this right of first refusal. Well, the most recent information that I have is that one of the owners that was trying to sell his place got lowballed. He wasn't even close to what fair market was. It's a big issue, and it does drive a lot of complex issues that are going to come later. My second question or concern is the lack of communication. I have asked several times for information and have not gotten an answer. My son wrote a letter to the boards and requested that each member be given a copy of that letter. We got an acknowledgement that yes, everybody was sent the letter, but we haven't heard one word since. Totally, either overlooked or forgotten, or they don't want to answer the question. And I'm here to say we need an answer. And if you think you're not involved as a resident with this issue, wait till you meet with your attorney the next time and talk about your will and how it's written that's going to involve the passing on of Hilton Head as a asset of your estate. That's what my will says. I bought my place for my family. I'm enjoying it and have for 25 years, but I'm not going to be around forever, and time is running out. My kids are already asking questions, how are we going to do this, Dad? And I don't have any answers, but I know what the answers need to be, and either you get it fixed or I'll fix it with my attorney in my will. But I don't think that should be necessary. But please give us some feedback. I really do think there's more agreement here than there is disagreement, but what I've been told, the resort says they are not going to let the right of first refusal be removed. They are going to stand for that. They're going to fight for that. There's no compromise. There's no talking about it. And if that's true, that's a sad day in Sea Pines. And I never thought I'd be standing here 25 years ago when I saw that covenant that says you have a right of first refusal. Most companies do when a resort is new. We're 70 years old. We're long past the reason to have right of first refusal. And letters are being written and they're being ignored.
Thank you. Microphone number 2.
I just want to make a quick comment, and my wife would attest to this. Man, I respond to every communication I get, and I know Mark does. So in terms of communication, we're sure giving it a try. This is a good example, but board meetings are open to the public. Questions and answers are taken at the board meetings. They're posted on, the agendas are posted on the website. We've tried to open this process up to total transparency. That's the reason we're having the meeting today. That's the reason we're talking about these questions. So once again, ask my wife if we what kind of time we spend on communication.
Well, and I'd like to make a comment. And maybe this is just being naive. Maybe I'm not properly educated, but we got 5,890 unit owners who own villas, condominiums, and homes in this 60-plus-year-old community. Every one of us accepted a set of covenants when we made the investments in the properties that we have. This is not new, and it has worked for those 60-plus years, with the exception, as Steve has said, and as a couple of the residents have said, with very few exceptions. And now suddenly, when there is a opportunity to fix a number of things, this becomes the number one issue in people's minds, and they're prepared to say no to a package over one single issue. And what I would say to every one of you, as it relates to the right of first refusal or any one single item, step back. Are we getting everything, or are we getting nothing? Because this isn't, you can have that, and you can have this, and I'd like to have that. This is a package. This is a package. You vote no, and all this comes off the table. And where do we go from here? Just think about that.
Microphone number 2.
Yeah, very quick, simple question. Steve, you mentioned that the tennis would most likely be relocated to Lawton Woods area. You've got the livery stables to the right of that road. To the left, where you cited the courts would be, is where there's a boarding stable. Is there any plans on relocating that within Sea Pines, or would that be eliminated?
Well, the boarding stable, which the Summers built, and they did a fabulous job with it, unfortunately there wasn't really a market for boarding. And so they have very few people that have been using the boarding and using the riding rings that are there. So our plan would be to just leave the barn in place and carve out 8 acres in front of the barn and for the new tennis facility. So there could be boarding that would be available, but there isn't. Unfortunately, there isn't. The barn really isn't used for that. And we've got to work through, the summers and the lease and what we're going to do there. And we wanted to make sure it was going to fit on the site, so that's why we had Stan and USTA involved. But our plan wouldn't really be to eliminate it, but there's no boarding that's happening today.
Thank you. Webinar question?
Sting. There we go. Sorry about that. Hello. There we go. Sorry, guys. Our question from the webinar is...
Let's switch over to microphone 1 and come back.
All right. Number 1.
I think
Nope.
Might be dead.
No.
George Bombardier, Sea Pines resident. And with regard to your question, why did it become such an important thing? It's been very important to a lot of us. This is the chance we have to take it out of there. And with regard to Sea Pines Resort, you stand the chance of making a huge amount of money off this deal. You're good to us, granted. That's a given. But why is it so important for you not to give up that? Because you're making a bundle of money. What do you think is going to happen in Harbor Town if this project goes to and it's a success? You're not going to want to expand there? What are the residents in Harbor Town going to do when you come and buy one of the residents and lock in their values? That's a huge issue, and this should be taken care of. If it's more important, we're voting. If it's more important to the majority of people, why shouldn't they take it out? Thank you.
Okay, I have a question over here.
Webinar, go ahead, and then we'll come back to you, Carl.
A question from the webinar. Oh, I'm sorry. What was it? Oh, answer.
Steve, I guess it's up to you to answer that response. Cliff.
I can tell you that our planning, what we've reviewed today, requires no property expansion or acquisition.
The properties transact every day, and every day we sign waivers for the right of first refusal. And so, 99% of all properties out there, we have no interest in purchasing. We don't want to get involved in transaction. The closing attorneys know how the process works. It works beautifully. It's not a problem. So, we really have very little interest in purchasing residential properties. And as I mentioned earlier, we've used it a handful of times over the years. And Fairway 1 is sort of a unique situation where it's next door to the Plantation Club, directly across the street from the Beach Club. There's 14 units there. We've purchased 3 of those. We've been working with some other owners there. That is like a unique situation. But for the majority of property owners, I think you should rest assured we have no interest in purchasing the property, and we just want the property transactions to happen just as normal. And we process and sign the waivers on a daily basis.
Webinar.
A question from the webinar. Will the fitness center and spa that you are planning to build be available for resident use?
Yes, absolutely. The fitness center and the spa will be open and available, and we hope that property owners will use it. The spa is going to need to stay busy and active, so hopefully property owners will use the spa and the fitness on a regular basis.
I think we're back to microphone 1.
Yes. I'm Sue Harris, and thank you, Charlie, for answering my email. I did appreciate the response. My question is about number 13 that was on the screen. Will ASPPPO be allowed to initiate
Go ahead and I'll repeat it.
Without first obtaining Sea Pines Resort approval. My question is, it says yes, future referendums may be initiated without the Sea Pines Resort approval. And then a little tiny print, it said, so long as they do not have material impact on the Sea Pines Resort. My question is, would you define what material impact would be?
You want me to do that?
Yes.
You got a real tough issue here. I've heard people say, for example, that we should save $5 million. Why would the resort give up their protection and allow us to bill them $5 million? Okay, maybe it should be $1 million. Why would they do that? Material puts the onus of the decision on that on the resort. In other words, we come forward with a proposed referendum and proceed with it, and the resort says that has a material impact on me. Well, they're going to have to demonstrate that it was in fact material. There's just no good compromise for that, and not all impacts are monetary. What if we passed a referendum saying they couldn't use the name Sea Pines? What if we passed a referendum that said anything that had to do with their access? So it isn't just a dollar amount, and it's a very difficult thing to deal with. Let me go back to something I said right at the beginning. There's a system of checks and balances. The resort cannot affect or change a referendum without your approval, without the referendum of being approved by the residents. If the resort came to us and said, we'd like you to give up that right, and we can change anything we want so long as it doesn't exceed $5 million. We would never accept something like that. So there's a balance here. We all have rights and we all have protections. The protection that you have is that if they want to change a referendum, you got to vote on it. And the protection they have is that if you come up with some harebrained idea of what you wanted to put a referendum, they have a right to say no. That's a reasonable protection, and having run a business, and a lot of you have, would you invest $100 million in a community that could take it away from you without any say over that? I wouldn't do that. They're not going to do that. So I think it's a reasonable balance. What this allows us to do is move forward with referendums that have to do with the housekeeping issues that we have here in Sea Pines that need to be dealt with. The derelict buildings that are deteriorating, the neighborhoods that are messed up by various issues. We need to be able to start moving those referendums forward, and we have the right to do that.
Thank you.
Microphone number 2.
My name is Carl Becker. I've resided here since 1992. I have worked with ASPPPO and CSA over the years. My list of possible covenant amendments has a date of 2006 on it. I have negotiated with Steve. I have negotiated with Don Nelson about seeking to change covenants. And I must say that I think you have done a wonderful job. I am tired of listening to people opposed to everything the resort wants to do because it's not enough. We fought about the beach club, we fought about the parking lot, and over time, these things get done. They've been done in a wonderful fashion, and I think that we should have some tolerance for the resort's desire to expand the inn capacity. I would raise one question, and that is, you talk about ASPPPO having the right to initiate a referendum that doesn't materially affect the resort. I think that really should be that it will not veto the referendum unless it materially adversely affects the resort. So I think that perhaps is an oversight in the way you've put your presentation together. Lastly, I would really like to say that this $1 million, which nobody else has mentioned in the questions, when we were negotiating previously, we wanted the resort to do something. We didn't know what. Nobody ever came up at that point with $1 million contribution to the community. I do think that the people who have worked for the last 2 years to present this have done a heck of a job, and I would like us not to lose because there's 1 or 2 issues that we care about that haven't been taken care of in this. I think for the good of all, it's a compromise, and that's what we need to push forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Amanda?
Our next question from the webinar comes from Dolores. Will CSA continue to pay for resident access to the 2 remaining pools as well as the new pool that you're discussing in Harbortown?
Mark?
The 2 pools, the existing Harbortown pool and the pool at South Beach, we will continue to pay for until we don't have the right to pay for them anymore. And that's when the resort builds the new resort pool. We will not be offered that opportunity.
Thank you, Mark.
Microphone number 1. We have 10 minutes left. Go ahead.
I'll be as quick as I can. Dick Matthews. I have 3 questions, I would say from constituents in Harbortown, but I think most of it has been addressed. So about the pool, the parking, and so on. So I guess the direct question to Steve and Cliff would be, are you proposing that we vote on the referendum without specific, without specifications of exactly where parking would be, if there was going to be any sort of a parking structure where it would be, and in particular, tree removal, and what trees would be protected or not protected? What would happen to the general look of Harbortown is the general question here. And would this all be done after the referendum? It would not be part of knowing exactly what would happen before asking for the vote. That's number 1. Second question is along the lines of what's the process of voting? And this is from me. This is not from the constituents. So my understanding originally was the board votes, then the ASPPPO members vote, then the general community participating property owners vote. Is that the process or not?
Let's take the first question, Steve. You address the first one, and I'll go to Charlie for the second.
Yes, Dick, I appreciate your comments. We don't have a plan for a parking garage. So the only changes we would make is just trying to expand the parking that we have, realigning the parking lots, and trying to improve the current surface parking. So there's no plan currently for a parking garage in Harbortown.
Charlie, you want to address the voting process?
Yeah, I'd like to address 2 things. The voting process is that the ASPPPO board has to approve by majority a change in the agreement, in the hotel agreement. So there's something called the hotel agreement. We're not going to do away with the hotel agreement. It will still be there. We're going to amend it from 60 rooms to an additional 90 rooms. So that's, the ASPPPO board has to approve that. The next question, which we've spent considerable time researching, is what role does ASPPPO play in the overall referendum? And what we plan to do at this point in time is have a separate ballot. In other words, there will be a ballot that goes out if you're an ASPPPO member, and you will vote that ballot. And it will have on it the question of whether or not you approve the amendment. If you're not an ASPPPO member, you still get to vote because it's a referendum and all property owners get to vote in a referendum. So in my view, it'll be a single ballot that is sent to ASPPPO members and a single ballot that is sent to CS or to all the other members, and they will vote once on whether or not they approve this.
And it'll be executed, Dick, in such a way that it'll look just like the annual elections. The residents are used to receiving a yellow and a white ballot. So as I see it, you'll see when we put the ballots out, you'll get a yellow and a white ballot. You'll be voting as an ASPPPO member, assuming you're an ASPPPO member, and you'll be voting as a CSA property owner as well.
Yeah, and I go on. This is a complicated thing. Nothing's simple here. So the ballots have to go out by mail, so that they will be a mailed ballot and returned by mail and counted by an independent third party.
Over a 30-day period.
Over a 30-day period.
As it relates to the questions piece, what we handed out and what we said was available Q&A, this is a work in progress. The questions that were asked today that may not have been addressed in here, we'll be taking a look at. We will have future editions of this that are much more up to date based on what we're hearing from the community. You have a follow-up, Dick?
Yeah, and I have another comment I want to make too, an important one.
Okay.
Go ahead, Dick.
So the follow-up is, it's, as I understood what was just said, it is not basically 3 separate votes. Board, then ASPPO members who could vote for or against or whatever in some sort of percentage fashion, and then it goes to the community. In other words, there's no place for an ASPPO-only vote that could even stop the referendum from being offered to the community, correct?
The ASPPO vote will be part of the referendum.
Okay.
Board, ASPPO board, ASPPO member, CSA property owner.
And we'll get legal counsel review on that with the ballot. We're working on the ballot right now, so we'll make sure that that's right. I want to make one other additional comment, and I want to kind of build on something that Mark said, and I think it's important. A lot of the questions here have to do with our own personal issues. They don't necessarily have anything to do with the referendum. There's nothing in the referendum about a parking garage, about the gate fee, or anything like that. This is really an attempt to try and understand what the referendum is about. Let me say what I think the referendum is about. What I believe this referendum is about is that Riverstone Group, through Sea Pines Resort, has come to us with a proposal. This is what we'd like to do. We've answered it with, here are our conditions. Maybe Carl could have negotiated them better than I did, but we did the best and we came up with, I think, which is a pretty good package. In our view, and in the resort's view, this is the best option available to us, but it isn't the only option. The resort has other options. If this referendum fails, they're not going to stand still. They're a big organization. They have obligations to their company as well. They're going to proceed with Plan B. What is Plan B? This isn't a multiple choice where we get to say, okay, well, I'd like Plan B or Plan C better, so I'm going to vote for that one. We have a one-time opportunity to accept a package. If you don't want the package, the world is going to change anyway. This is an aging resort. These facilities, some of the facilities we're talking about are falling down, CQ's among them, and those things are going to change. So you have an opportunity here to accept a package, or you have an opportunity to turn it down. If you turn it down, it doesn't mean that there won't be a parking garage. It doesn't mean there won't be a tennis court. It doesn't mean anything. And so it's a package that you need to evaluate as a package. And hopefully you'll see that it's a good thing for us. But it isn't the end.
Let me just add one comment to Charlie's remark. As chairman of the Long Range Planning Committee, and as we've made public at the last CSA board meeting, our hydrology study shows that we need to be putting $1.6 million a year for the next 20 years into protecting your flooding potential issues. We don't have $1.6 million a year in our assessments going forward. We're not talking about enhancing the community. We're talking about protecting the community. This package that Charlie referred to gives us the opportunity to increase assessment dollars into the budget from potentially the commercial, from potentially the gate, from potentially the resort, and the $1 million bonus that's on top of that. All that means is that if that does fail, as Charlie elected to, and all those other issues go away, the gap between where we are and what we need and what we will be asking property owners to fill in to protect you is this big. If we can get the revenue stream going forward with more from the gate, from the commercial, from the resort, what we will be coming to you from will be less. Microphone number 2.
I'm Christopher Cliff. We've been residents since 2001. I'd like to pick up on some remarks made by our colleagues on the podium today. And in particular, the last remark Charlie made said that there's a package on the table. And you either accept the package or you lose the package. The problem that I have with the package is it's an incomplete package. And it seems to me, listening today, and watching the presentation that the controversial issues are the ones that are entirely within the authority of Sea Pines Resort. That's the tennis courts, the swimming pool, and the parking. And they're outside of this package. So it seems to me, as Charlie says, we have a one-time opportunity to accept a package. So my comment is, I'd like it to be a more complete package, and for these controversial issues to be resolved and also submitted as part of the Sea Pines Resort's plans. And so my next question, I do have a question, and my question is, what is the haste? Why are you coming forward at this point in time with a request for a referendum when you don't have a complete package? The Sea Pines Resort's executives are making it quite clear that there are issues that which they understand to be contentious, which they haven't yet resolved in their own minds how to deal with them. And until they resolve in their own minds how to deal with them, it's very difficult for us to understand how they will impact upon property owners. So my question is, what is the haste? What is the driving force behind coming forward at this stage with a referendum? Thank you.
Panel?
Oh, by the way, I would like to say, I think what you've done, Sea Pines Resort, has been absolutely excellent. And I thank you for all the hard work.
Timing, who wants to deal with that? Steve?
Yeah, I want to deal with it first, and then
All right,
Steve.
Troy.
This is an information session. This isn't the final package, so when we ask you to vote, we'll have the final package together.
Okay.
So your point is well taken, and I think Steve can address what the planning cycle is, which is critical to this, and why we need to have this decided by the end of the fall. Steve.
Well, as I mentioned, what we've worked on in the past few years is basically improving clubhouses, golf courses, and the beach club that needed to be improved. They greatly need to be improved. And now we want to try to add to the end to create this premier experience and to really propel us into the future. And we've been working on it. We think the timing is right. The economy is right. Our owner is agreeable to it, and we're just we think it's a good time. We've got a year's worth of planning, engineering, and architectural work to do. So there's still a lot of time before you're going to see additional construction. And we're really excited about the future. And I just want everybody to keep in mind, all we're trying to do is add these 90 rooms to the end. There's a lot of issues that have been talked about, a lot of issues that are on the table, but we're just trying to do this improvement to the exciting improvement to the inn in Harbortown.
That I very much understand, which actually gets me back to the core of my comment. The controversial issues are those outside of the 90-room addition. And it's those controversial issues that are getting so many people excited and raising questions and potentially delaying you achieving your objectives. So why not try and address the controversial issues and then put them to bed as well? That's all I'm actually saying.
And I think Charlie addressed the fact that this is a moving target. There are a lot of things that are still being considered. If you look at what was released at the ASPPPO board meeting, there are several items that were on that term sheet that are not on these term sheets today. So the bottom line is, as these individuals are continuing their conversation, what will come before the property owners to vote upon will be very specific as to what is available at the time of that vote going forward.
Mike, I'm clearly not making myself clear. What I'm talking about as an incomplete package is the Sea Pines Resort proposals, not the term sheet that Charlie sent out. We could debate that all day long because there's some ambiguity in the wording, but so be it. Is the absence of a complete package from Sea Pines Resort, who clearly have a parent company to consider.
And I think they understand that. I may have repeated it differently what you did, but I think the group up here understands exactly where you're coming from.
Great. That's great. Thank you very much. That's all.
Webinar. I have 11:32.
The question from the webinar comes from property owner Fred. Has the capacity analysis been done to determine Sea Pines Road infrastructure can reasonably accommodate a request by 90 rooms? To the extent that Sea Pines Resort adds the rooms, is the expectation that the increased traffic and congestion can be accommodated?
Well, I think Steve mentioned earlier that they were in the midst of doing a traffic study. So that has not come forward. I'm sure it will. The way I wrap my head around this, so we're talking about 90 rooms at double occupancy is 180 people. If the room would, and if every one of them are driving, that's 90 vehicles. 90 vehicles. And I know every one of them are not going to be driving. They're going to be using some form of public transportation. So although I think there's some chance that there may be some additional traffic impact, my view without seeing their traffic study is it's going to be relatively insignificant. That we have issues in this community that affect our traffic on our existing roadways, on our leisure trails, that are far, far more important than the bit of traffic that might be generated off of 90 hotel rooms.
It is 11:32. My question to the panel is that we are exceeding our time frame. Would you like to take one more series, or shall we close down?
Well, I see 3 people. Why don't we deal with these 3 individuals?
That was my thinking.
Yeah.
Let's go back.
Oh, now we see 4.
I see people leaving. We'll go to microphone number 1.
Hi, I have a specific question about the tennis center. As everything else you've done, I'm sure it's not just going to be 12 tennis courts popped onto Lawton Stables. It's going to be beautiful, and it's going to generate a lot more traffic in that specific area. So I am asking if you would please consider the traffic that's going to be generated there, because it's not only going to be additional people going to play tennis, but then there's going to be horses crossing the road, and there'll probably be more people coming through the back gate to access the tennis center. And so there is going to be a huge traffic impact within that area alone. So I don't know if it's a question or more of a request, but I'm asking you to please give special consideration to that area, because there is going to be an impact as a result of what I'm sure is going to be something quite nice.
Thank you.
There's a lot of planning needed there.
Number 2.
We've had a lot of conversations and comments coming up. I just want to know, what are we going to be asked to vote on? What is the referendum going to be asking all of us to approve or disapprove, vote yes or no? What is on the referendum? I've not heard that stated directly yet. I think Steve got close to it a couple of minutes ago, but I'd like to hear exactly what it is that we're going to be asked to vote on. We'll publish that.
We'll publish an actual referendum well in advance of the referendum, so you see exactly what it says.
The basic issue is you have 2 issues.
He wants you to summarize.
Yeah, you have two basic issues the resort is asking for. They're asking for 90 rooms, and they're asking for the option to possibly put a tennis center in. All the other benefits that were on that sheet tend to be things that come back to the property owners. The only things that they're asking for are those 2 things right now, as I understand the referendum.
So a lot of the other comments that we've heard, right of first refusal, all of those things, none of that is in play at the moment. Those are ancillary, as they were stated before, comments that are not part of anything that is being put forward by the resort at this time.
That is correct. That's right. Those are individual property owners who are interested in having covenant modifications that have nothing to do at this point with what is on the table.
Thank you.
Webinar.
Yeah,
they just keep going. Last round right here. Last round. Yes, sir.
Good evening. Steve, you mentioned introducing a appraisal feature to the first right of refusal. Do you anticipate trying to have that be binding?
We would be willing to make it binding. We'd make it a benchmark for what the property values are, Bill. I mean, we're open to a lot of things there, and we'd like to talk with you further about that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, for you all, I have the distinction of being, I think, the only in the history of Sea Pines property owner who's had the first right of refusal exercised on him. And I've received what Don, my neighbor, described as the lowball offer. So it's an important issue, and I think you also, to us, and I think you heard Steve say that the majority of the people wouldn't be affected. Didn't expect more than 90% might not be affected. Well, the reverse of that is 10% of you are going to be affected. And I think I encourage you to get yourself educated on the right of first refusal and what it does to your property owner rights.
Thank you. Microphone number 2, second last question.
Okay, my name is Rita Hungate. I've been coming to Sea Pines since 1974 and a property owner here now and currently a permanent resident. My question or my comment is a bit different than the others that have been expressed. We're all talking about quality of life for ourselves and every, people with whom we come in contact. If this proposal in the referendum goes through, the additional 90 rooms will require more people working in this hotel. Everybody there will want the highest quality worker imaginable. And where do you propose housing the people? What will be their transportation in and out of the resort if they're not housed within Sea Pines? Currently, there is a problem on in this island with having enough workers for Kroger's, Starbucks, a variety of commercial establishments, as well as housing. How do they get their transportation back and forth across the bridge? It's a really big problem. Do you anticipate anything at this point early on? And I know the devils are in the details, but these are later details. What do you anticipate doing here, and what have you done in other areas like Kiowa or others for this situation?
Well, workforce is certainly a big issue with us. It's our number one challenge. We have a global effort in attracting the people that we need to operate the resort today. We plan to continue with that effort and expand the number of people that we attract to come and work for Sea Pines. We will continue to offer housing for them and transportation to and from the workplace.
What will you do about housing? I mean, do you currently have some, or are you going to build it, or what's the plan?
We currently lease a group of apartments. We probably have to expand that. We are looking at the possibility of building and owning our own housing in the future. And we realize we're going to have the housing to have the workers that we need.
And that housing will be outside of Sea Pines?
Yes.
Correct. Okay.
Thank you. Last question. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I want to compliment the resort. I've been coming here. My name is Jim Adams. I'm a multiple property owner. I've been coming here since 75, been a property owner since 76, have owned multiple homes all over Sea Pines, currently own several. I've seen huge improvements since I've come here, particularly since the new owners, the current owners of the resort, have been involved. And I don't quite understand the animosity that's being shown by some of the property owners. If this referendum is about, if it is only about adding 90 hotel rooms and also finding a better way to locate the tennis courts, I'm all for it. And I think it's insane for anybody to vote against it. That's all they're proposing. That's all that's in their way right now. If anybody was interested in owning property here, whenever they bought it, they knew about the covenants. I read the covenants. I haven't reread them in years. It's not an issue. I don't, maybe it's an issue for the people along that Fairway 1 area. But as a property owner, I've never seen such huge improvements in this society. I lived on the ocean course during the Ginn era, where it would flood every time it rained. And so I've seen the improvements. And I think most of you older people, and I'm no spring chicken, have seen the improvements too. So what is the issue? What is the issue? How can you possibly not support the program that's being explained to you? You have to have some confidence in the owners. What have they done wrong? have you ever seen anything that they've done that you didn't admire? I just don't understand it. And I just want to say that obviously I'm voting for it, and I hope everyone here votes for it. I think it's ridiculous, some of the comments that have been made. You've got your own lawyers. You signed contracts. You knew what the situation was at the time you bought the property. Those covenants were well thought through. I don't know of any community in the history of any of these kind of real estate and resort communities that's been better thought through by Charles Fraser and all of the successors. So I don't understand what in the world y'all are so ticked off about. But I think you're a bunch of jerks if you don't vote for it.
I think it would be appropriate to end the meeting at this time. Drive safely. Thank you for your input. Please spread the word. We hope we have been educated a little further in this process. Thank you.
We've been in talks with them about purchasing the center, but they aren't interested in selling.
I'll make sure.
We do, but they don't want to sell it.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for your comments.